Hi, my name's Heather, of the Urban Workshop, and I'm here to teach you jewelry making. Today we're going to learn how to solder and set a flat back stone called a cabochon. This is very basic beginner's jewelry, and these skills will help you create any kind of jewelry that you're interested in the future. We're going to start with safety. We're going to wear our safety glasses the whole time. We'll keep our hair back, have a clip. And when we're doing jewelry, we're going to keep our safety glasses on at all times. We're going to not have really loose clothing. We're going to be dealing with fire and flames and sharp tools, so we want to be really careful. I've chosen this green stone, and we're going to make a bezel and set the jewelry on a piece of copper. So I've got my cabochon. I've got 28 gauge bezel made of copper. We're going to be using copper sheet, 26 gauge, and we're going to be using copper solder, which is made out of copper and phosphorus. There's different types of solder available. You can have silver solder, and that comes in a variety of hardnesses that you would use depending on the temperature. So it would be from hard, medium, or easy, and you would start with hard, do all your soldering. The next time you solder, you could move to medium, and the next time you solder, you can move to easy, and that would prevent the solder from coming apart every time that you solder. We are using copper today, so we don't need to use different hardnesses, because when the copper combines with our copper, it creates a new alloy, which is harder to melt. So to get started, I'm going to take my copper bezel and I'll start on a wide section of my stone, hold it, and bring my copper bezel around. Here. Where it overlaps, I'll make a mark. And that's going to tell me where I'm going to cut. I'll use these flush cutters or diagonal cutters and just clip on my line. I'll put my bezel back around my stone to check. And it looks pretty good. And what I'm mostly interested in is going to be how well those pieces fit together. What I don't want is a gap in between. I don't want one side to be flat and the other to have an angle, because when I melt the solder, you can't fill gaps with the solder, so they need to be really flush tight together. If they're not, you can take your files and file them flat to eliminate any gaps. You always want to be checking your fit, making sure it'll still fit. If you cut it too short, don't worry, you can still solder it and then stretch it out. Copper is a very malleable metal, so it's very easy to stretch. What I'm going to do next is move my copper bezel back and forth and try to create tension so that those two pieces sit together perfectly without me having to hold it. So this one would be ready to solder. When we solder, we have a magnesium block, and that protects the table from getting burnt, and a charcoal block, and that holds the heat of our torch in the piece of material that we're trying to solder. This solder comes in a big roll, but we only need tiny pieces, so we have a bunch cut already. The solder melts easier if you flatten it. So I have a tiny anvil. So I'll just hammer this solder flat. And that'll help it melt. I'm going to put my solder on my charcoal. And make sure my bezel's ready. I'm going to spray my bezel with this flux. What that does is it helps the solder melt and flow, and it protects my metal from getting burnt. I don't want to spray the flux directly onto the charcoal because it could catch a fire. Now I'm going to put my bezel right on top of my solder, where those two pieces of metal meet. The reason I put my solder underneath my bezel and not on top is it prevents the solder from moving or jumping away when I'm trying to heat it up. We're using a butane torch, and to fill these up, there's a hole in the bottom. I'll turn my butane upside down and just press until it starts coming out like that. So now I know it's full. To turn on my torch, there's a safety lock in the back that you pull down, press the blue button, okay, and then press the silver button to keep that flame on. I'm going to start heating up my bezel from the back. I want the heat to come around the back and sneak up the front. So I'm just going to slowly go around back and forth. That flux is going to turn white, and my copper is going to turn bright red. So I saw that piece of solder melt, and it gets sucked up into that joint. Now this is hot, so I'm going to use some pliers and quench it in my water bucket. And then tug it to see if that solder stuck, which it did, and it looks great. So our bezel's ready. I'm going to put it back on my stone to check the fit, and it fits great. You want to be able to slide your stone in from the top and also be able to put it in from the bottom. If your bezel was too small, you'll still solder it, and then you can stretch it out using a ring mandrel. I have an example here. It's too small to go on my stone, so I'll put it on my mandrel and hit it with a soft face hammer, brushing it down, trying to stretch that copper out. Since my mandrel is tapered, I'll turn it around and do the same thing. And be careful if your bezel was far too small, your solder could end up breaking. So now I'm going to check. And now it fits. And make sure it fits from the top. And it fits now. So now our bezel's ready to solder onto a flat piece of copper, and that'll be our backing for our jewelry. You want to make sure that you take off this paper before you solder, or else it'll catch on fire. So just peel it off. Now you want to check your bezel and make sure there's no gaps in between your bezel and your copper. Check both sides, see which one has the least amount of gaps, and then you'll sand it to prevent any gaps. This is wet dry sandpaper, so I'll dip it, choose whichever side I want to sand, hold, and you can go in circles, you can go in figure 8 pattern. Always be rotating your bezel to prevent putting too much pressure in one spot. So this one is ready. And now all the gaps are gone, and I can solder this to my backing piece. I'll need my blocks. I'm going to spray my flux onto my copper away from my block. Put it here. I'll spray the bottom of my bezel. And the most important thing is making sure that your bezel is the shape of your stone before you solder, because you won't be able to change the shape afterwards. Okay. So I've already cut and hammered a bunch of pieces of solder, so they're available. I'm going to use these tweezers, and I'm going to put a piece of solder about every 2 to 3 millimeters apart around the inside of my bezel. So I have about 6 pieces of solder in there. I'm going to get my torch, and this time I'm going to focus on the flat copper sheet first, because I want that to warm up before the bezel. It's a little bit thicker than the bezel, and I don't want to melt the bezel. So I want to focus on the bigger area first. Solder is going to flow wherever it's the hottest. So I want it to flow underneath the bezel onto the flat sheet. When I start to warm this up, the solder might get excited and start to jump. So I'll have my tweezers or my pick ready to push them back in case they move. This process takes a little longer than just soldering the bezel, so you have to be more patient and try to keep your flame on the outside until that copper sheet has warmed up. So the the solder's starting to melt. And I want it to come underneath my bezel out. So I'm really focused on that outside area. Okay, and that's it. Take my pliers, pick up my copper, put it in the quenching water, and then I'll just kind of tug at it to make sure that it has stuck. And now you've got this red black color. This is called fire scale. If you like that, and some people do, you can leave it, or you can put it in what's called the pickle pot that has this acid solution called Sparex, and let it sit in there for about 5 minutes, and that'll take all of that fire scale away and bring that copper color back. After about 5 minutes, you'll use these copper tongs get your jewelry out, dip it in water, and then we're going to add it to this baking soda and water solution, and that'll neutralize the acid from the pickle. So we'll let that sit for another 5 minutes, and then when it's done, the copper color will be back, and then you can continue to work on your piece. So now it's time to decide what to do with the outside. That's where the creativity comes in. You've got your stone, and now you want to display that stone however you would like. I found these findings, little feathers. So I think I want to hang some from my piece and create a necklace. You can create a necklace, or in the future you could solder this to a bracelet or another piece of jewelry. I'm gonna just make a necklace, so I need a tab to put my rope on, and I'll also create another tab to hang my findings on. So I'm gonna draw my tabs first. And then I think I'll just follow this edge all the way around. So that'll be the basic shape of my end product. We have tin snips, and we'll just use these to cut out our shape. Okay, now I have my shape cut out. And the most important thing about jewelry is to make it soft and not sharp, because it's going to be against your skin. So we need to file and sand all of these edges. We can use a Dremel with the sandpaper attachment. We can use our files to get into really sharp points. We've got triangle files that we can use. And then I have sandpaper, wet dry sandpaper, ranging from 320 to 2000. So that'll get out all of our scratches and make our metal really soft and nice against our skin. For the sandpaper, we can dip in the water and just follow those edges, making sure to get all of these edges, anything that'll be rubbing against our skin. And we also want to remove scratches and bring back that shine of that copper. So this is almost ready. Now all that's left is to drill my holes to hang my necklace and to hang my findings. I'm going to use this spring punch, and it's going to show me where the drill bit is going to land. Anytime that you drill, you should always punch, because that gives the drill bit somewhere that it knows to grab onto. Otherwise, it'll just run off. I'm using the back of this piece of wood so that I don't damage my table. And I have this drill bit. I'm going to put my drill bit into the top of the flutes on the bit, not too far in. You don't want to be closing the jaws of the drill on those sharp flutes. So now I'm going to put my drill bit where I punched, and I'm going to keep my drill straight up and down, and I'm going to drill into this piece of wood so that I don't damage my table. So now I'm ready. I can put my stone in. I'm going to lay it inside, press it down. Now, if I just left it in there, it would probably fall out. So I'm going to use this bezel rocker. It's got this dome shape on the top. I'm going to push in and rock it back and forth. I'm going to do that on one side and then turn it 180 and do it to the next side. Now I'm going to go to the top and do that and turn it 180 again. Roll it. Now I can go around the entire thing. That prevents it from getting pushed too far to one section. Now I'm just going to fold that bezel over my stone to keep it from falling out. Okay. Now I'm going to use this burnishing tool. We're going to use this inner curve to smooth the edges over as a finishing touch. When we drill holes, sometimes extra material will be on the other side and we can just not know what we did with this. So we can just file that off. So there is our stone set in copper with a bezel. To finish, I have jump rings. I'll get a couple copper. The best way to open a jump ring to prevent it from getting deformed is not to pull it apart like this, but actually to pull it apart like this. That way, when we put it back together, it won't lose its shape or its strength. I'm going to do that with 2 pairs of pliers. And just bend it open. Put it through my hole and bend it closed. The last thing I'll do is attach my findings. Actually, I'll open this one up again. Slide those on. There we go. Now I just need some rope or some leather and I'll be finished. So we've got some leather. Through. And then you can decide how long you'd like your necklace. And you can tie a knot, or you can attach a jump ring and a clasp. I guess I could show that too. If I wanted to attach a clasp, I could tie a jump ring to one side and the clasp to the other. Just kidding, this leather's too fat. Oh. All right. Change this. If I want to attach my necklace with a clasp, cut my thread, decide how long I would like it. I can tie my jump ring to one end. And my clasp to the other. Cut off any extra. And I can slide this open. And slide my jump ring in. No, I can't. There we go. Slide it closed. And now my necklace is ready. And that's it. Now your jewelry is done. You've learned to set a bezel and you've learned to solder. And thank you for joining me. My name is Miss Heather at Urban Workshop, and have a great day.